and we aim to gain insights and other financial institutions, particularly multilateral development banks, majority owned by emerging markets, countries, and national development banks, financial institutions. On that particular point, I would like to underline that as far as the institution established by BRICS member countries, so from the very beginning, we consider interbanking mechanism of BRICS combine the efforts of the national development institutions like BNDES, like VB, like DBSA, Exim Bank of India, and CDB of China, the biggest and well-established national financial intermediaries, as a close partners and good source of the project for NDB. So, and we pay special attention to the further development of that cooperation. Today we have distinguished guests going to address that audience, in spite of the fact that we have a rather small audience today, but I think that it's good for us to listen to each other. And I'm very glad to see Her Excellency Rania, Minister of International Cooperation, Planning, and Economic Development of Egypt. With her good support, we started I hope, very effective and efficient cooperation with Egypt. Mr. Din Lichun, close partner, peer institution, sitting very close to us, and we used to communicate very closely, and I should say very helpful to each other. They're sitting in Beijing and we are in Shanghai. Hope to see your colleagues and you more often, both in Beijing and Shanghai. And we have here today Senior Vice President, African Development Bank. We just had a good meeting with Ms. Swazi Tashabala and hope to have close cooperation improve. We have good projects in South Africa already, but then I hope that we can do more. And let me reiterate, welcome to my colleagues from brothers from interbanking mechanism of BRICS, VB, BNDES, DBSA, Exim Bank of India, and CDB, unfortunately, not. We have nobody today, but anyway, I just had a meeting with them. So please welcome.
Thank you, VP Kaspikov, for your opening remarks, and warm welcome to all the participants. As mentioned, the aim of this seminar is to gain insights from peer MDBs, national DFIs, and commercial banks who have extensive experience in financing infrastructure in emerging markets. The key themes to be covered this afternoon include the strategies for increasing collaboration, strategies for local financing, and enhancing credit assessments. It's a great pleasure to see senior management from a diverse range of financial institutions, as well as senior government officials joining us today. I'm Han Bin, the Director General for Private Sector and Non-Sovereign Guaranteed Transactions of NDB, and I'm privileged to be the moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, as introduced by VP Kaspikov, we have the pleasure to have invited 3 honorable keynote speakers, well known in the development community for their extensive knowledge, rich experience, and remarkable achievements, to share their insights on financing infrastructure development by DFIs. Our first keynote speaker will be Her Excellency Dr. Rania Al-Masha, Minister of Planning, Economic Development, and International Cooperation of Egypt. Dr. Rania Al-Masha spoke already yesterday at both the opening ceremony and the flagship seminar of NDB governors, and your highlight at the end on one word, collaboration, left us deep impression. We are looking forward to hearing more from you now. Thank you. Please.
Well, thank you very much, and it's an honor to be here, and with the dear colleagues, Mr. Vladimir, President of AIIB, Senior Vice President of African Development Bank, and all other colleagues. Absolutely, partnerships and collaboration are key. But let me first say that very pleased to be here in South Africa, again, a country that has a development model. And when we look at the countries of the new development bank, as I mentioned yesterday, it's very important that we see the diversity, but also there's so much when it comes to peer learning. And this is also going to be reflected in how the NDB works with the other MDBs to be able to finance different projects. Of course, infrastructure connects markets, drives economic growth, enhances the quality of life for citizens. So it's really at the heart of economic development. And when we talk about infrastructure, there's not one type of infrastructure, but there's plenty. We're talking about water, sanitation, we're talking about renewable energy, we're talking about roads, we're talking about clean transportation. So infrastructure should be seen beyond just construction. It really does affect the livelihoods. It's able to push frontiers of the economy and definitely improve lives. Nonetheless, as countries are growing and as the needs are growing, so does the needs for investing in infrastructure. Just to give a few numbers, the infrastructure financing gap in Africa alone estimated to be around $100 billion per year. And again, the public resources are not enough. When we take a look at, for example, sub-Saharan Africa, the needs are close to 7% of GDP. If we take a look at other countries, we would find similar gaps. According to the World Bank and the Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery, also low and middle income countries require in the trillions of dollars to be able to close this gap. And let me just mention also, we should not forget technology gaps, because when we look at recent publications by the World Bank, the middle income trap identified was that if countries are not able to do catch-up through technology, we are going to be left again in a situation of increasing gaps. So this is, again, one very important issue to think about. On another hand, of course, climate finance also falls short, and the gaps have been identified in the trillions. So many numbers, I don't want to say the numbers, but in all events, regardless of the source, we do know that these are big numbers that need to be filled in. Also, there is stark realities imposed by climate crises. Again, when we take a look at those who are emitting the green gas emissions versus those who have caused them in the past, we do see that as a very important and significant disparity, which many MDBs have been trying to help with this, particularly in the African continent. Also, in order to attract and sustain investments in climate resilient projects, this requires significant effort. The MDBs, governments, private sector, and now we're talking about philanthropy, any items of finance that can de-risk private sector engagement, extremely, extremely important. And that's why seeing NDB, AIIB, African Development Bank at senior levels together means that this message of trying to finance and reduce cost is very, very not just important, but it is finding solutions to do this. What we have done in Egypt is to try and identify some of the solutions to this. And given that we hosted COP27, we put together with the African Development Bank and many other of our partners the Sharm el-Sheikh Guidebook for Just Financing, giving a definition of just financing, 12 guiding principles. How can we be able to, again, help developing countries in the right towards equitable paths of development, but at the same time also try and make sure that climate ambition is identified. And then the key point here is not just the quantity of finance, but the quality of finance. And that's why I'm very happy to see institutions that are able to push technical assistance and capacity building, because you need to protect that finance will become sustainable, not just one project and then we leave, but how can countries continue to mobilize finance because the needs continue as well. And this is something that, again, I hope the different IFIs and MDBs think about. It's not just about finishing a project, but actually laying the foundation for countries to be able to be convincing in trying to do one project after the other, be it from domestic resources, be it from crowding in private investments or the concessional finance. So this is, again, one of the key items that we try to put out there, the quantity and quality of financing. The other very important aspect, and I talked about it a little bit yesterday, that it is very key that country ownership takes center stage, and country ownership takes center stage through strategies. I think our colleague, when you were mentioning this session, you said strategies are very, very important. And that is true. Countries need to be very clear with their priorities, need to be very clear with how they are doing both development and climate, that they're not mutually exclusive, but they come hand in hand, so that you are giving a convincing argument when you are preparing your budget, that this is an infrastructure project which is important, but at the same time, it does address climate ambitions. All of us have nationally determined contributions that we have to report under Paris Agreement. So it's very important that we are mindful of many of these responsibilities and requirements, but also the pledges that are made by MDBs or by the developed world through the MDBs also need to be honored. So this is another important aspect, and I am very happy that when I look at AIIB, I look at the African Development Bank, New Development Bank, these concessional financing pockets and innovative tools that are coming along are a way to show how pledges go into implementation. And it's very important to do this, because as you're going from one COP to the other COP, it's not just about coming up with a new number, but showing how the existing pocket of financing made its way to countries. This is where the lessons need to be learned. Also, if there are certain projects where grant component came to de-risk private sector, we need to be more vocal about showing these examples to give hope that we can move forward. I want to conclude with 2 points, and I mentioned this also yesterday. When we talk about BRICS countries, and the NDB is considered to be the BRICS bank, it is very key that we think about ways to operationalize investments flowing between the countries of BRICS. And we need to think about institutionalizing this, making these work groups quite clear, because there are so many expectations from the public about what BRICS will deliver. And the NDB is the institution that is formalized to be able to do it, and therefore, not to put pressure on Vladimir, but absolutely everyone is looking at the NDB as a way to operationalize the BRICS group. And then finally, MDB collaboration. MDB collaboration is mentioned once, twice. We see MOUs being signed between MDBs, which was not the case in the past. So we know the will and the commitment is there, but I also want to say that it is also up to the country to see how it can attract this collective effort. So as much as it is your job to work together, it is also our job on the demand side to be able to present investable projects, to be able to show that the public money required to bring in the concessional and crowd in private sector is transparent, is well communicated, and that there's a pipeline. So there's also not just to say the pressure is on you, but the pressure is also on the countryside. So anyway, this is a dialogue which I believe is happening, has been happening, but I think from in the different meetings that we participate in, it's very important to give practical operational examples, maybe not on the stage, but in the work groups that happen at the technical level between the MDBs. We have very successful examples with AIIB, with the African Development Bank, with the World Bank, where they have worked together, not just on projects, on budget support, on sovereign instruments, which help, again, lower the cost of financing for the country. Many, many important examples. So I do hope that what we have done successfully together, we continue, but also showcase for other countries as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rania Mashad, for your keynote address from the government perspective of developing countries, offering us from financial institutions, particularly NDB, much food for thought, particularly on how to effectively close the gap in meeting demand for development with customized financing, both on the public and the private sector sides, and both in quantity and in quality, and solutions beyond finance in a collaborative way. Thank you very much. Our next keynote speaker is Mr. Jingli Jun, President and Chairman of the Board of Directors of Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. President Jin spoke about the meeting of minds yesterday at the flagship seminar for governors, very much inspiring to the audience. Let me take the liberty to say that as a former staff working at the Chinese Ministry of Finance under supervision and the guidance of Mr. Jin as former Vice Minister 2 decades ago, I'm extremely honored and delighted to listen to you again on this occasion. Let us welcome President Jin.
Thank you, Bingham, for your very nice words. Vice President Kazbekov and Minister Rania Mashad and Senior Vice President Swazi Tshabalala. Distinguished guests, panelists, ladies and gentlemen. It's such a pleasure to be here today at this important seminar on financing infrastructure development by development finance institutions. As a Multilateral Development Bank entrusted with the mission to finance infrastructure for tomorrow, AIIB is laser-focused on this issue. We have a broad vision and look forward way ahead into the distant future. Investments in sustainable infrastructure are vital to achieve inclusive and resilient growth and meet global climate targets. Being signatories to the SDGs and the Paris Agreement, developing countries have been grappling with the challenges to meet these goals at the pace fast enough with necessary urgent financial and technical support. The road ahead is bumpy. On much of the distance they need to cover, they have a hedge to clamber and a brook to stride, to say the least. According to a recent estimate by the Climate Policy Initiative, a minimum of additional $1 trillion a year in sustainable infrastructure and climate action is needed globally to meet the Paris Agreement 1.5 Celsius degree threshold by 2030. In Asia, the annual financing gap in developing economies is estimated to be close to $1 trillion for infrastructure investment in mitigation and adaptation. Accelerating and scaling infrastructure investments is also crucial for putting sustainable development goals back on track. Investments in sustainable infrastructure needed to expand fourfold by 2030 for emerging and developing markets to achieve the SDGs. These infrastructure financing gaps call for development finance institutions to reform their approach across both their public and private operations to rapidly scale infrastructure financing in developing economies. With regard to public operations, I would like to highlight several aspects that I regard as particularly important. First, MDBs must zero in on client centricity. We must be agile and fast, losing no time in delivering essential financing in a suitable way for those most in need. Project processing and due diligence should not be compromised, but this is no excuse for lengthy red tape and long drawn-out process, often excruciatingly painful to the clients, consumed by anxiety over the outcome. Client centricity also means that we must develop financial tools which help countries withstand shocks and enhance resilience. As an example, AIIB's board recently approved the introduction of climate-focused policy-based financing, which supports our sovereign clients' efforts to realize their national climate transition objectives. Demand from our members for this type of financing is huge. In June this year, the first climate policy-based type of loan of $400 million for Bangladesh was approved right after the board's approval of the new financing tool. We believe that private sector investments into green projects will follow hot on the heels of the policy and regulatory improvement. In addition, AIIB is actively exploring the possibility of introducing climate-resilient debt clauses in our lending operations. We are expanding the concessional lending tools so badly needed by our less developed members. Second, MDBs must strengthen mutual reliance on co-financing standards, not just among MDBs, but across all IFIs. We must do all it takes to reduce transaction costs for our clients, extending beyond the mutual recognition of procurement standards to the mutual recognition of ESF and ESG policies. Since our inception, AIIB has followed a model relying on lead co-financial policies and procedures and adopts a unified approach to protecting accountability, to project accountability. This approach has improved operational effectiveness and client experience while also reducing client costs. Third, MDBs must push in tandem the fast processing of the project and the mobilization of the technical grant and financial resources needed to bring them to fruition efficiently. AIIB is acting on the call here. Earlier this year, with the World Bank, we launched a digital co-financing platform, cofinancing.org. 10 MDBs have already signed on with 73 projects listed worth $65 billion. And we expect this number to grow quickly in what is another tangible example of MDBs working together. Fourth, MDBs must mobilize a much larger coalition of financial institutions to grow the pipeline of local projects, which underpin our global drive towards a sustainable future. To that end, AIIB is honored to co-host the 2025 Finance in Common Summit here in Cape Town. Together with the Development Bank of South Africa in the first quarter of next year, by working together, MDBs and local public development banks can partner international best practice with local knowledge of development opportunities to improve access to development finance for all. On the private side, more can be done to mobilize financing for infrastructure. I list 2 examples that our bank has been working on in infrastructure asset-backed securitization and infrastructure asset trusts. Regarding infrastructure securitization, AWB sees this as a promising tool for crowding institutional capital into the infrastructure sector. Since 2018, AWB has been involved in over $2 billion of infrastructure collateralized loan obligation issuances through 2 vehicles. One good example is Bayfront Infrastructure Management, which is Asia's first fully-fledged infrastructure securitization platform. AWB created Bayfront in partnership with Clifford Capital in 2019. Bayfront securitizes and distributes commercial banks' infrastructure loans in Asia. AWB has approved $240 million in infrastructure asset-backed debt securities by Bayfront, promoting institutional investment and recycling bank capital of some $1.2 billion in total. And our bank is now investing in similar securitization issuances with a Hong Kong mortgage company, and we're very keen on doing more. On infrastructure asset trusts, structures like infrastructure asset trusts allow us to leverage the knowledge of experienced fund managers to increase investor comfort, while also scaling up investments and generating reliable returns. For example, AWB has invested $108 million in 2 new infrastructure assets trusts in India. These trusts are giving local investors access to long-term revenue streams while supporting local infrastructure. Ladies and gentlemen, in 2005, Mr. Nelson Mandela shared his conviction that as long as poverty, injustice, and gross inequality persist in our world, none of us can truly rest. With progress on achieving the SDGs stalling or regressing, we must continue the hard work of reforming our international development finance systems is fit for the challenges of the 21st century. In that regard, we at AWB look forward to doubling down on our collaboration with partners like NDB, African Development Bank, and many others. So to do that, together we can work towards more fully meeting our clients' needs to finance infrastructure for tomorrow. And tomorrow is waiting for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, President Jing, for your very insightful and aspirational remarks, together with example cases of innovation from the perspective of AIIB, which was established in the same year as NDB, with a mission to finance infrastructure for tomorrow in Asia and beyond. AIIB's experience shall surely enhance our confidence in closer cooperation of MDBs to deliver on our common mandate to support and promote development. Our next speaker is Mr. Swazi Shabalala, Senior Vice President of African Development Bank. We're looking forward to hearing from your observations and experience at African Development Bank with 60 years of history in assisting member countries' development, which is particularly pertinent and useful to NDB as we have 2 member countries on the African continent that have enormous potential for development cooperation through capital mobilization and financing for impact. Let us welcome Senior Vice President Shabalala. Ms. Shabalala, please stay on the stage after your speech.
Thank you very much, and let me congratulate the moderator today because he pronounced my name very well. So, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, let me first of all start by congratulating the new Development Bank and the authorities of South Africa for this excellent organization of this annual gathering of the NDB. I am very delighted to be here today to discuss the role of development finance institutions in financing infrastructure development. I think that we all know that without infrastructure, sustainable development in Africa is a dream, and achieving the SDGs and the objectives of the AU's Agenda 2063 will remain out of reach. For Africa to make a dent in closing its infrastructure gap, Dr. Rania mentioned some numbers, but I'll give it to you in GDP terms. We need to increase financing, infrastructure financing from the current 3.5% of Africa's GDP to 4.5% of its GDP, almost immediately, if we are to make any progress at all on the SDGs. The lack of infrastructure has a direct negative impact on the living conditions of populations by limiting access to basic services and hindering Africa's economic transformation. I think it also exacerbates the critical challenges such as food insecurity and climate change and retards growth. For instance, we estimate that the lack of infrastructure in Africa costs the continent 2 percentage points in terms of growth every single year. Limited access to reliable transportation and regional corridors also restrains regional economic integration. Africa compares very poorly in this regard, with intra-regional trade in Africa at a low of 15%, compared with 68% in Europe and 58% in Asia. And I think the comments also from Dr. Rania that we need to look at facilitating inter-Africa trade resonate. We've just approved our 10-year strategy. It's our second 10-year strategy. The bank is celebrating its 60th anniversary in about 2 weeks' time. So we've been at this for a very long time. And what we know is that even with all our combined resources as the DFIs, and they are formidable, these resources, closing Africa's infrastructure requires partnership and collaboration. But I also want to emphasize something that was already raised by Mr. Jing, that we need to reform our approaches as DFIs to doing development if we want to meaningfully scale up our interventions, especially if we want to really deeply sustain the collaboration with the private sector. We have our marching orders from the G20. As you know, the MDB reforms have called for us to be bigger, better, and more efficient. And it's important that we re-examine our own processes and procedures, which I don't believe are adequate or even fit for the challenges that we face today. The way we work is complex, even archaic, placing an inordinate burden for countries and the private sector. Our clients find it difficult to navigate our various processes and find the transaction costs of working with MDBs too high. We take a long time to make decisions and implement them, and combined with the capacity constraints faced by our clients and the limitation of the project implementation units in client countries, it can take many, many years for a project to be implemented, delaying the development benefits. So there's urgency in what we need to do. And I think at the heart of these efforts, as already mentioned by others, country ownership is essential. So I will not dwell on that. I think it is absolutely necessary that we make sure that there is ownership of development by countries. It sounds trite, but it's amazing how many times MDBs have gone to countries and say, we think you should do this, rather than saying, well, what would you like to prioritize and what would you like to do? But we are learning and we are changing. So we can collaborate as DFIs in crowding in the private sector through various ways. I think that we need to remain creative and innovative in mobilizing as much concessional and moderately concessional resources as possible, and to leverage these resources to crowd in the private sector. I think we are uniquely positioned to mobilize these types of resources, which are necessary for blended finance and for risk mitigation, in order to really engage in a long-term way with the private sector. Rechanneling the SDRs through MDBs who can leverage these funds is an important initiative for which we should continue to drum up support. We are working with other MDBs in this regard, and of course with the IMF. We need to be more intentional in tapping the resources of vertical funds to project development and preparation of sustainable infrastructure. We at the African Development Bank are doing so through the Alliance for Green Infrastructure in Africa, which is leveraging 400 million in concessional finance to prepare a pipeline of $10 billion in green infrastructure, $10 billion in green infrastructure projects. We should also continue to explore ways to stretch our balance sheets, and many of the initiatives from AIIB we've also engaged with, and I hope, Mr. President, that we'll also be able to talk how we work together, maybe to exchange exposures, which would also help to increase the capacity of our balance sheets. We need to do more co-financing and syndications. We've had very effective co-financing partnerships with countries such as China, for instance, through the Africa Growing Together Fund, as an example, for billions of dollars of financing that we've conducted. We've also extended our co-financing partnerships with other DFIs, such as the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, the Islamic Development Bank, and of course the New Development Bank. Building on the Lesotho Highlands Water Project and Transnet projects that we co-finance with NDB, the bank is eager to continue to expand its co-financing activities with the NDBs in Africa, and we're looking at projects in Egypt already working together. DFIs can also bring unparalleled investment opportunities to recipient countries through deploying risk mitigation instruments and de-risking solutions, which can attract regional and international capital, mobilize blended finance to mitigate risks associated with climate finance projects, and mobilize, especially for climate adaptation, which I think is the more difficult, to mobilize from climate funds. Examples of bank operations that have benefited from risk mitigation instruments include the construction of the standard gauge Tanzania-Burundi Railway project, which unlocked nearly $4 billion in financing, and then, of course, Lake Turkana wind power project in Kenya. Capacity building and policy reforms are essential and arguably the most critical for accelerating infrastructure development and for attracting private sector resources. Countries that are really good at this are usually very successful in meeting their commitments with regard to the Sustainable Development Goals. We need to increase domestic resources in order to improve countries' ability to develop, prepare, and fund infrastructure projects themselves without exacerbating their debt situation. And of course, policy reforms which require the scaling up of technical assistance and institutional assistance to establish proper frameworks, for instance, for PPPs. And then later on this afternoon, there will be a discussion on local currency financing, and I think that the development of domestic capital markets is important in this regard. So I think there are two issues here that we need to introspect as the DFIs on how we can reform to reduce the transaction costs of development finance, on how we can reduce complexity in our individual and joint interventions with countries, and how we can increase mutual reliance, the use of country systems, and how we can introduce more pragmatic or programmatic approaches to address regional and global challenges facing us. So I want to echo the words of the Standard Bank Group CEO at yesterday's session, who said that commercial banks, or emphasized that commercial banks, their primary mandate is to lend to good projects and good opportunities, and they are ready and willing. Institutional investors also are looking for high-quality investments. To deepen their engagement, we need to collectively address the single biggest bottleneck, which is the lack of a solid pipeline of bankable projects that advance sustainable development. We, as the MDBs, need to address our own risk aversion, but we also need to explore the appetite of the private sector in joining these efforts to mobilize finance for project development and preparation. The task appears daunting. However, I also want to quote Nelson Mandela, who said that it's impossible until it's done. I think this is our opportunities as MDBs to live up to those words. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Senior Vice President Shabalala, for your keynote address with valuable views and ideas. I particularly thank you for mentioning risk aversion, something we are facing almost every day in the operations, particularly from private sector operations. And we'll hear you soon in the panel discussion again. Ladies and gentlemen, we've just heard three high-level and very insightful speeches shedding lights on financing infrastructure development by DFIs from various perspectives and setting the scene for more detailed and practitioners' discussion on the themes of this seminar. Let us give our thanks once again to the honorable speakers with a big applause. Thank you very much. Next on the agenda is a panel discussion. We are equally pleased to have invited 9 distinguished and well-experienced panelists to share their observations, reflections, and recommendations based on their experience and lessons learned over the years working at the forefront of infrastructure investment for development. Considering the difference in proposed themes and the number of speakers, the panel discussion shall be conducted in 2 parts in sequence, each focusing on different views to allow more and deeper thoughts and ideas. Let us start now with the first one. On the first theme, I'll invite 4 panelists to provide perspective on partnership amongst MDBs, including comments and recommendations on co-financing. Each panelist shall speak in turn for about 5 minutes, then we'll see if we have time for Q&A, given the more time to respond to questions. Without further ado, let me welcome the first group of panelists to the stage. Now we have already Ms. Shabalala, Senior Vice President of African Development Bank. Thank you. Next, Mr. Zhongjing Wang, Chief Executive Officer of Multilateral Cooperation Center for Development Finance, MCDF. And Mr. Rodrigo Salvado, Director General of Operational Partnership Development Department of AIIB. On the list of panel members, we also have Mr. Gabriel Felpeto, Vice President of Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean, or CAF, who is unfortunately unable to join us in person, but is very kind to have sent a video presentation that shall be shared after the other three panelists. Let me also join you now. So distinguished panel members, thank you once again for agreeing to share your views with us this afternoon. So as introduced, may I invite Senior Vice President Shabalala to share your views once again on top of what's been said.
Thank you very much again. I hope you can hear me. I'm not sure what's said. Okay. Thank you very much. I mean, I've already highlighted, I think, some of the challenges, that we face, and only because I think it's important. We're celebrating our 60th anniversary. We've already, as a bank, invested $177 billion in the 60 years of our existence in development of Africa. And obviously, given the fact that there are other MDBs that are involved in the financing of development initiatives in Africa, a lot of money has come in to Africa. I think that's the point. And, so we really need to think about, how we can accelerate, because time is of the essence. I think with all the multiple crises, it's very important that we think about not only how we can help countries, really have more focused approaches, to development through technical assistance, to helping them with policy reforms, but also how we as MDBs approach, the development, interventions. I'm very proud of the work that's been done by the African Development Bank, but I think that, if we are to work together especially, which makes sense, we need to think about our fragmented approaches. All of us have different ways of doing the same thing, which doesn't help countries, and we have different priorities. All of us, have different country strategy papers with the countries, which doesn't make sense. There should really be only one country strategy paper that all of us, work with the country together to actually, implement. So this is a big part, and we are already talking to each other. As, per the directives of the G20 that we do that, we're already talking to each other about how we can coordinate better working with these, with these countries. And then, of course, I think I like the comment, that's made at different fora that money is not the problem. Because it's very easy for, us to focus, we don't have money to do this. But there's plenty of money. There's a sea of it. There's trillions and trillions of dollars available for good investments and for good assets. The question we need to be asking ourselves is, what is it that we need to do? What is it that we need to put in place to be able to mobilize these resources for development? So I think that, I would like to limit my remarks, with regards to those particular issues. I think there's lots of things we need to do internally. There's a lot of things that the countries need to do. But I also think that, the opportunities are fantastic, and I'm optimistic. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Wang from MCDF, a very unique and pivotal platform that could connect closer all the MDBs. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to this important seminar. Because the topic of collaboration among MDBs is indeed the foundation of what we are doing at the Multilateral Cooperation Center for Development Finance. At MCDF, we see the rising of new MDBs like AIB, NDB, along with increasing presence of financiers from emerging markets and the developing countries, which we call new partners, as a timely response to the urgent needs from borrowing countries for sustainable development. These new players bring in a lot of loans, equity investments, and diversified financial sources. But they are not here to replace existing MDBs. They are here to work with each other to achieve synergy and amplify development impact. This is absolutely the right approach. But putting this strategy into action is not without challenges, as Senior VP Swazi just pointed out. I would like to share some observations from our point of view. First, the lack of a bankable project pipeline. MDBs usually rely on grant-based funds to assist their clients with project scoping, initial assessment, and designs. But due to limited funds available and the complexity of coordination, MDBs intend to handle these tasks independently rather than collaboratively. To be frank, there's really competition among MDBs for this rare free funding. And another challenge is the different policies and approaches. For example, on environmental social safeguards, some MDBs have bank-wide policy with well-designed institutions, while others only have project-based policy without a dedicated setup within the bank. Another issue, to be honest, is about how much we rely on country system. We all rely on country system, but the depth is totally different. Some MDBs, like NDB, adopted as a bank policy and prioritize its usage, while others use it in specific areas or even only use their own standards. The third challenge is about the role of client countries. We all know country ownership is the key to achieving sustainable development. But without an enabling environment with countries' strong commitment, transparency, and efficiency, MDBs cannot collaborate effectively in the field. Therefore, it's essential for MDBs to actively engage countries to ensure the successful development outcome. Last but not least, coordination among MDBs is costly and time-consuming. Sorry to say that. We have been lacking a dedicated formal institutional collaborative mechanism for a long time, in spite of some coordination effort at sectorial and thematic areas. But things are changing. MDBs have recognized the importance of collaboration among themselves and intensified effort to work with each other in areas like procurement, environmental social standard, and anti-corruption. So I'm very excited that MCDF is part of this effort, and we're moving very quickly and deeply into it. In 2020, MCDF was set up by donor countries and 11 MDBs, including those present here today, NDB, AIB, AFDB, and CAF. We work very closely with MDBs. Our purpose is to promote partnerships among MDBs and the new partners to advance cross-border high-quality infrastructure. We have to instrumentalize the finance facility which provide grants to support project preparation, feasibility study, advisory service project structure, and other due diligence activities. We work through collaboration with MDBs. Now we have 5 implementing partners, including AIB, AFDB, CAF, IFAD, and AFC. Up to now, we already provided $34 million grants supporting 26 projects in the sectors of energy, transport, and ICT. These grants are expected to mobilize $7 billion investment in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. We prioritize of support for joint financing and co-financing between MDBs and other financiers. For example, we already work with AIB and AFDB to identify 3 DFIs and 3 local commercial banks. We provide a $5 million grant to support these 2 MDBs to help upgrade environmental social safeguard, develop green project pipelines for these 6 new partners. Another instrument is the collaboration platform, where MDB's new partners can share information on project, disseminate knowledge, and enhance capacity. We cover topics like climate smart connectivity, sustainability, environmental social safeguard, PPPs, and anti-corruption. We have see a group of over 3,700 participants from 1/3 from MDBs and other financiers. So we hope that we could do more to support collaboration among MDBs and other new financiers. This is what we are doing and why we are created. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wang. Now let me give the floor to Rodrigo now to share your perspective from AIIB.
Thank you so much. Is it working? I don't need it anyway. Yeah, that's fine. No, thanks. So first of all, I think, thank you, Bingham, for bringing me with friends in the panel. It's always, good to enjoy with friends. And also with people that we actually working on this. And one of the things I was thinking is, every time you come to a place like this, everyone actually gets the talking points, and then you end up with a laundry list of 300 things that you should do. But in this one, actually everyone is talking about the same things. Yes. So I think that, after this, probably what you can do is actually some sort of Cape Town action plan, right? Because, we have only, and I think we are all hammering on the same points, and I think that's a good thing. Sometimes you are here looking at, oh my goodness, Swasi just said everything that I just said. But I turn that into an opportunity, because you say, great, Swasi already said the things that I would say, and I will hammer again on these things. So let me choose a couple of things. There are many things that you can do. But I think that because we have been talking to each other on the things that actually we believe are the most binding constraints and the things that can unlock most of the value, we are now talking the same thing. So let me pick up 3. First of all, and you're going to tell me, Rodrigo, these are the things that, they are pretty basic, right? But we are not getting them right, so we need to get them right. And they are basic, but we need to get them right. The first one is project preparation, collaboration upstream. We have been a long time, the NDBs, trying to fight for the same tickets downstream, right? Without taking into consideration that perhaps it's easier to collaborate more upstream to enlarge the pipe of project, and then perhaps we actually do it better, right? And that's the thing, because also once you catch these projects too late, they are painful to actually design. They don't fit each of the institutions, etc. so on. So one of the key basic things that we have to do is actually go upstream. This is where this gentleman actually comes in, because NCDF, right, help us to do those things, help us to get grants to actually co-finance it. So one of the things that we're doing for Islamic development, for example, also think about very large ticket projects which are super painful to put together. Talk about Africa, regional connectivity, right? Or cross-border connectivity, super painful. Some mind thought that probably we could put it off ourselves individually. That's not the way to do it, right? Putting together like cross-border connectivity is a lot of political issues, a lot of technical assistance. Unless we actually unionize and get those things right, we are not going to get it. So again, one thing is, and I totally agree with Swazi, it's not about money. These guys have money, right? We also have some money. It's about actually putting the money in the right things. So first thing in my mind is upstream collaboration, project preparation, get out there, catch them before, right? And actually be thinking along, not what are the things that you have in your pipeline right now, but the things that you want to see in the pipeline in 3 years from now. Because also that's the point with climate. We don't even know the technologies that we are going to be financing in 3 years from now. So we need to actually catch that before. So that's number one. Number two, I say again with the same thing, but yes, mutual reliance of standards, make the life of our clients easier. It's a nightmare, right now. I mean, you have, and actually many of these banks had the same board. And then in the different board, they said, no, this bank has better things than the other, but you're sitting also on the other board. And they said, no, this bank has the better thing. So we need to get that right? And again, I don't think that all of the NDBs we're going to sit down and sing Kumbaya together and everyone is going to be happy. I think we need to start with what we can do. So picking a couple of projects that we can actually do co-financing, mutual reliance, and a couple of projects, go from there and then go for the big thing, but not to think that we are going to start like harmonizing the whole thing at the same time. But before, because we were going for the ideal, we were saying, no, this is too hard. We should start doing these things. And also, we should start doing it bilateral things, trilateral things, right? That actually works. So number two. Number three, right? You can pick many numbers, but let me pick one. Is the issue of regulatory, regulation, right? We're talking with Ralph, we just met, but they from a standard chat. But the point is, always when you talk to the private sector, first we were joking that many times we manufacture these ideal private sector solutions, then the private sector are going to look at guys that are not going to war, right? So, but anyway, we should ask them before. But the thing that we should do is actually focus on regulatory environment. I mean, President Xi was saying that we just, approve our climate policy lending, right? And there's a lot of needs to do that. But also, it's very hard to get those right. Because I'm not going to pretend that this is no moral hazard engaged in those deals, right? There's a lot of that because you are actually asking the government to actually do things, right? And again, Swazi was saying also capital, domestic resource mobilization, all that. So we need to make sure that also unionize, because when we actually get together, we can synergize our expertise, macro expertise, fiscal expertise, and all that. So how we do better that, is also very important. And again, depending on whether we have more time, we can go more onto that. But I think, at least I put in my mind like 5 things that we all hitting on the same thing that actually from this, a conversation, we can actually go and say, what, NDB, African Development Bank, AIB wants to write this agenda. I can tell you, when you put things that actually make sense, people follow, right? The problem is we have been not doing many things that make sense ultimately lately. But anyway, so let me stop there.
Thank you very much, Rodrigo, for your very practical recommendations for action, together with the level of energy you bring us today. Thank you very much. Now next, let us hear from Mr. Gabriel Telpeto from CAF via video. Can I ask our staff to play that for us?
Good afternoon, esteemed panelists and participants. I would like to thank President Dilma and NDB colleagues for inviting CAF to join this important seminar. It is a privilege to be here virtually as we come together to discuss how we can maximize development impact and accelerate climate action through enhanced collaboration among financial institutions. CAF is a multilateral development bank. owned exclusively by its borrowers. Unlike other NDBs, where shareholders include a mix of borrowing and non-borrowing countries, our ownership structure, which is similar to that of the new development bank, introduces distinct challenges in supporting our member countries' development efforts. These challenges include maintaining the quality of our loan portfolio, upholding a strong credit rating, securing funding at competitive rates, and meeting the ever-growing demands from our shareholder countries, where urgent action is needed to foster growth and drive prosperity. The economic indicators add urgency to our mission. Latin America and the Caribbean's regional GDP is expected to grow by just 1.4% in 2024 and 2.6% in 2025. These rates are among the lowest compared to all other regions in the world. To unlock growth, it is essential to address persistent barriers such as inadequate infrastructure, high investment costs, and insufficient basic services. The investment gaps in physical and social infrastructure have widened post-COVID, and while some recovery has been achieved, the pace of progress remains insufficient. CAF plays a critical role in addressing these investment gaps, not only by providing financial resources, but also through strategic partnerships. We are collaborating closely with other development players and the private sector to align our efforts, increase our lending capacity, and maximize the development impact of our interventions. I would like to highlight a few of our strategies for expanding support to our shareholder countries. These strategies focus on three main areas: balance sheet optimization, innovative financial solutions, and partnerships. First, to optimize our balance sheet, we are engaging in exposure exchange agreements with other multilateral development banks to diversify the risk in our loan portfolio, and also analyzing the use of guarantees and insurance products. Additionally, we are exploring the use of hybrid capital, including the use of special drawing rights to boost our lending capacity, as advocated by the African Development Bank and other NDBs. Second, we offer tailored solutions that help our shareholders address various risks. In terms of currency, we provide local currency financing and guarantees. For commodity price shocks and natural disasters, we are exploring how our debt service suspension mechanism, designed to help countries heavily reliant on commodity exports managed by price shocks, can also be applied in the aftermath of natural disasters. Through sustainable clean loans, we are supporting our member countries meet the Sustainable Development Goals, as well as their climate pledges as stated in the nationally determined contributions. As an example, last year we closed a PIVOC, as we named the product, in Mexico to support climate action and gender equality. Regarding sustainable debt management strategies, we support client countries in debt conversion strategies to diversify foreign currency exposure. And to help countries during liquidity shortfalls, we offer liquidity facilities. For example, since we became prescribed holders of SDRs, we structured the first SDR bridge loan, and since then have arranged 2 more for Ecuador and Argentina. And last but not least, through our coordinated efforts with other institutions, we are working to catalyze the transformative investments that our region urgently needs. Over the past years, our co-financing and resource mobilization efforts have twofold. We have various co-financing agreements in place and have been accredited as implementing entity of global funds. I am proud to share that we collaborate with most of the institutions present at the seminar today. To sum up, the challenges we face are complex, but together we can make a difference towards closing the investment gaps in Latin America and the Caribbean. By optimizing our balance sheet, innovating in our solutions, and strengthening our partnerships, CAF is committed to overcoming these challenges to drive sustainable and inclusive growth for the people of our region. Our shared mission is to ensure that every dollar invested delivers the maximum development impact for our member countries. I look forward to continuing this work together with all of you, our valued partners. Thank you very much.
Thank you, we just heard very valuable experience and thoughts from representatives of MDBs that established in different continents, Africa, Asia, Latin America, as well as a platform that established to connect us more closely. From your views and ideas, I see common understanding on the importance of partnership, importance and benefits of the partnership and collaboration, outweighing competition. That creates synergy and enhanced value addition to infrastructure investments. I wish we could have more time for Q&A, but we may need to leave that to a later session. But I'm very encouraged by the spirit of partnership to work more closely with peer MDBs and other DFIs, as well as commercial banks from private sector operations perspective in particular, on co-financing, both on transaction level, on transaction basis, and through more programmatic way, including under perhaps a common country partnership framework or a commonly agreed action plan. With that, I thank you once again for joining the first part of the panel discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Next, we'll have the second part of the panel discussion on the second and the third themes. I'll invite the other 5 panelists today to share experience and reflections on local currency financing in the different represented countries and organizations, availability of long-term financing and refinancing risks allied to local financing, use of internal ratings and any local rating consideration when financing transactions, and also to introduce panda bond markets in China by NDB. As repeatedly mentioned yesterday by the number of NDB governors, the call for expanding local currency financing, it is clear that local currency financing is much needed by our member countries and clients to address foreign exchange risk and other market risks, and it also raises challenges to MDBs in terms of fundraising in local capital markets of member countries, use of the most relevant credit rating methodologies in risk assessment, international, national, or internal, and pricing. I'm looking forward to hearing from our 5 distinguished panelists from various institutions to share their experience, lessons, reflections, and recommendations. Let us now welcome them to the stage with warm applause. First, Mr. Ralph Gunn, the Senior Vice President for Energy, Infrastructure, and ECA Finance of Standard Bank of Southern Africa. Mr. Sergei Stochak, Senior Banker from State Development Corporation, VEB of Russia. Mr. Nelson Barbosa, Director of Planning and Project Structuring of Brazilian Development Bank, BNDES. Mr. T.D. Sivakumar, Chief General Manager of Export-Import Bank of India. And Mr. Zhongsha Jing, Director General of Treasury and Portfolio Management Department of NDB. As we did for the first group of panels, I'll also invite each panelist in this second part of the discussion to speak in turn for up to 5 minutes. I'm sorry for being a not professional timekeeper. And then open up for questions if time allows. as we honestly designed initially this event to be a more interactive discussion among professionals from the financial sector. So I would also encourage panelists to raise comments and questions amongst ourselves before opening the floor later to the audience. So without further ado, let me first give the floor to Senior Vice President Ralph Gunn. Please.
Just to check, can you hear me? Yes. Just to make, I'm from Standard Bank, one of the commercial banks that's taking part in this initiative, and just listening to the previous speakers and some of the themes that we're going to look at today, I think one of the themes that I almost pick up from the earlier session was the concept of speed to market. If you listen to the amount that is needed on an annual basis in our respective jurisdictions and our respective geographies, we need speed to market. We all recognize the liquidity is not a concern. There's enough funds available. So it's speed to market, which really speaks to the preparation phase of good bankable projects, which we spoke about earlier. And I believe that there is, as we have said, there is liquidity in the markets from a financing perspective. So I do think that there should be a focus or a nuanced focus in that, and that is to say local currency liquidity. And when we start talking infrastructure projects, we start talking about long-term funding. And when we look at local currencies, there are very few local currencies that can sustain long-dated loans. And so that is a key area that I believe that this audience can explore to unlock the additional liquidity required on the long-dated aspects. I think the other components that we started alluding to from the introduction is the concept of partnership with regard to ratings and how do we assess risk. A commercial bank view takes quite a lot of analysis at a project level rather than at a counterparty level. So we won't necessarily look at a sovereign or a AAA rated borrower. Some of these projects we look at does not have a borrower of substance when it comes to credit rating. We are used to dealing with SPVs. And how do we structure it such that we get comfortable? And what does that then translate into an internal risk rating? And so I think that sharing some of that internal risk ratings is important into the community so that we start assessing risk in a very similar way and understanding the risk in a similar way. And then I think the third point that I just want to put on the table is this collaboration between the private sector or the commercial banks and the multilateral institutions and DFIs. I would like, as a commercial banker, I would like to challenge my multilateral DFIs to say that in the South African market, in local currency, the commercial banks are doing 20-year funding. Is there a multinational that can take it from 20 years to 30 years or 20 years to 40 years when we start looking at infrastructure funding? And can we look at regionalized infrastructure projects where we can start looking at local currency initiatives across the regions rather than looking at the FX risk that is associated to hard currency loan versus local currency repayments or revenue lines of local currency. And in that area, in a lot of the discussions I've had, and it was quite pleasing to hear one of the previous speakers talk about the new products that they are looking at as multilaterals to take on the FX risk through the loan life. And so, for example, if there is a default later on in the years, that crystallization moment where a multilateral has given a local currency guarantee, but fundamentally managing their own balance sheet, they take it back to US dollar or euros or any of the other hard currencies, the crystallization risk on default ends up being the borrower's exposure. And that is questionable. If you are providing a local currency guarantee, the borrower should not have to still take on the crystallization risk back to hard currency. And so I think there's a healthy debate that can be had there. I think for the sake of time, those are the 3 points that I'd like to put on the table, hopefully nice and nice sparks to light the fire and stimulate some good discussion.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Gunn. Actually, we don't mind opening up the debate between the market and the DFIs, including Multilateral Development Banks. As a matter of fact, as you see, our next 3 panelists are from the 3 key national DFIs of the BRICS interbank mechanism. We'll hear from them, and then I would be expecting more interaction if time allows. So next, I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Stochek.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, sure, I was preparing for this debate, but after previous session, I decided slightly changed my intervention. The reason was very simple. A colleague from Asia Investment Bank mentioned the supervision issue. And it turned to be he is the first during 2 days of our session who mentioned this big challenge. It's really big challenge. Why? We are speaking about collaboration with the private sector. Private sector commercial banks are subject to quite tough supervision. And if our supervisor does not take into account their special function and role, in particular in blended financing, we wouldn't move far. I'm speaking this with open eyes because in Russia we managed to overcome these difficulties. We have the government and the central bank have special program, and my institution is operating this program devoted to, it is a project financing facility. We call it factory, but in terms of better understanding, I would prefer to call it facility or frameworks. This program stipulates that the government will give us some subsidies. But in terms of our discussions, I believe that it's much more important that board of directors of the central bank or our supervision body issued a number of decrees devoted to both our liabilities and our assets. Our liabilities means that when we issue bonds on Russian ruble markets, local markets, those who buy it has the legal authority to decrease credit allocations or reservations. They are allowed to decrease it in 5 times, not 100%, but only 20% of face value of my bonds need to be put in reserve positions. It gives good demand for my bonds issued on the local markets, and it gives good feelings of commercial banks to buy it. So it's a big issue, and it's from the side of my liabilities. From my side of assets, when we invest in making credits to investment projects, the same story. The supervision body or central bank is allowing ourselves not to decrease in times the allocations in our reserves. If the project is receiving the highest level of credit ratings, we supposed to decrease the reservations in some cases to 1% of the face value. So, and there are other decisions taken by the central bank together with the government. So, in summarizing my interventions, I would like to say that I managed to read quite a lot of reports devoted to the blended finance, especially those prepared by well-known company Convergence. It's Canadian-based. They made a number of comments that this is a big issue, that globally, supervisors are not so active in terms of supporting blended financing. And it's a big issue. So my proposal is, if we have here in Cape Town in February, as Mr. G said, we have Finance and Commons Summit, let us prepare the special session devoted to this issue of supervision and manage the activities of the DFIs, governments, and supervisors in terms of assisting these kind of activities, especially in terms of blended finance, because it looks like it's the only instrument or the only mechanism which would allow us to increase in hundreds of financial flows to the, for example, to the climate financing. So thank you very much. So I hope you understand me well. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stochek. Next, can I invite Mr. Barbosa from BNDES to share your views?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I would like to thank the NDB for the invitation to come to this conference. I went to the Shanghai conference last year, and I would like to use this opportunity also to inform of some progress that we have since the last meeting. And addressing the issue of this panel, how to enhance credit assessment. In emerging economies like Brazil, a critical issue is exchange rate volatility. And this is something that you cannot de-risk against, but you can share the risk, or you can allocate the risk where it's properly managed. And since last year, I remember last year I mentioned an initiative that the Lula administration was launching, and I'm glad to say that it's in full operation now, which is the emission of sustainable bonds by the Brazilian Treasury, and they allocate, the Brazilian Treasury allocates these bonds in a special fund managed by the Brazilian National Development Bank, by our bank, and the Treasury passes along whatever is the international interest rate, which is a low rate that it can borrow abroad, and it lends domestically at that rate. In doing that, the Brazilian Treasury is bearing the exchange rate risk, because the Brazilian Treasury, together with the Brazilian Central Bank, has a large volume of exchange of foreign exchange reserves, and they can better manage the systemic risk. And this has already increased the financing of infrastructure in Brazil. The total issuance so far is $4 billion for this fund, and there are another $4 billion in the pipeline for next year, focused mostly on environmental infrastructure, the recovery of degraded lands and water resources, and also in social infrastructure, urban development, public education, public health, public security. So this is one way to share or to properly allocate the risk that can be maybe useful for other countries. And we at BNDES, we use this fund in a blended finance. We combine the resources that come from this fund with resources that come from the NDB, from the World Bank, from the Chinese banks, from the Gulf banks. So in doing that, we are able to offer proper finance for long-term investment. The second issue that I would like to mention Ms. Shabalala mentioned that, and I completely agree. The question is to have good projects. And we at BNDES, our staff is about 2,800 people, of which 150 are just dedicated to prepare projects. Because we obviously found out that one of the bottlenecks was exactly in the project quality. So we have a large team just dedicated for that. We started helping mostly subnational administrations, municipal governments, state or provincial governments, not only with the technical and the financial details, but as Rodrigo mentioned, also with the regulatory details, the tax details, and we go with the project all the way until the auction. We do the road show, we do the market sounding. Sometimes we say, well, it's not the time to put this project in the market. And this has been very successful. At the moment, we are preparing 185 projects with a total investments of around $46 billion, and in a very broad portfolio, from nuclear plants to public parks, from schools to railroads. And this, at the end of the day, enhances the credit quality, makes the project bankable, as many people mentioned here. And the third point I would like to make is actually to share a challenge that we have been facing in Brazil, and I think will be common to some countries that still have a large forest area. I don't know if everybody is aware, but Brazilian emissions are mostly concentrated in deforestation. 50% of the emissions from Brazil comes from deforestation, mostly in the Amazon. We're investing heavily to recover these lands, and one issue that we are facing is how to make the forest generate income. The most obvious choice is to issue carbon credits. But then, you know, carbon credits now is like a crypto asset. You have qualities all over the place. And when we were analyzing that, it's public information, one firm, I will not name the name, but everybody knows who that is. One firm issued 95% of all carbon credits related to reforestation in Brazil, just one firm. And this firm, for other reasons, is facing some, how can I say, complaints in the international markets. So for Brazil, for other countries, emerging countries that still have a large forest area, the Congo, Indonesia, and other countries, I think it's time for we to figure out how to create or to foster the development of certifying agencies for our countries, not to be so dependent on just one or two firms. So this is something that we are already working on in Brazil, and we are open for suggestions, contributions, and partnerships from other countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nelson Barbosa. Next, I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Shivakumar from Indian Exim Bank.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Before I get into this issue of local currency financing, I just want to set the context so that people can relate what is the requirement of financing in India. So everyone knows very data points which has been mentioned. Between 2016 to 2040, the global financing requirement is about 94 trillion. 4 countries alone constitute about 50% of the requirement, and one is India. Currently, India's GDP is about 3.5 trillion, and the infrastructure gap is set to about 5% of GDP. So you can relate what is the magnitude of finance required in India. And Government of India has done few initiatives. One, they did what is called National Infrastructure Pipeline, collected all the infrastructure projects database, which for about 5 years, 2019 to 2024, which is about $1.8 trillion. They also created a few more initiatives, such as called National Monetization Plan, to create money for financing these projects. Because currently about 80 to 85% of the infrastructure projects are financed by public sources. But as more requirement comes, we need private sector funding also. So this is one such initiative. They also initiated a new initiative called PM Gati Shakti Multimodal Connectivity Plan, connecting all 16 major departments of railways, roads, etc., to have an integrated plan. So India had a few DFIs for industrialization, and we have 4 DFIs also. they created a new DFI only for infrastructure. So these are the few initiatives which has done. And if they have also introduced new financing mechanisms, something like InvITs, REITs, etc., by which some of the matured projects can create money for further projects. Coming to local currency mechanism, so what is the need? So these infrastructure projects are very long gestation projects. If it is left to foreign currency financing, sometimes it is faced for forex risk. So if it is possible to do a local currency financing, that is the best alternative. The other way also is most of these projects get the revenues in local currency, say it be roads, etc. The revenue is in local currency, and there is no fun in taking foreign currency and open to forex risk. So if it is possible, we should do local currency financing. A few years back, India introduced rupee-denominated bonds in outside market called masala bonds, wherein Indian companies can issue bonds outside India in rupee, and they can raise long tenor loans, and it can be repaid in rupee. So that's something which is evolving. In fact, it's not fully popularized, but it is picking up. Also recently, India is trying to do INR settlements in terms of promoting Indian currency as an international currency. It's slowly picking up. Indian rupee is not fully capital convertible, but it's making initiatives going in the right direction. Like with high trading partners, strategic partners, the Reserve Bank has put in system framework to settle in local currency, invoice in local currency, etc. Where the trading partner, if there is surplus, they are allowed to open special rupee Vostro accounts, which is in India, and the balance can be used within India, also in infrastructure projects. So there are partners like Russia who have surplus, they keep in India and invest in infrastructure projects. The few other initiatives of India is in terms of unified payment, UPI, making it very popular, and in terms of payment mechanisms. India is also trying to develop currency swaps, especially for South Asian countries, where it creates a pool of money, where neighboring countries like Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, etc., can benefit out of the currency swap mechanisms. And India also is part of Asian Clearing Union, where it's trying to work out with, including East Asian countries, whether two countries can settle on a net basis on the local currency, rather than going to a multiple, like US dollar. These are the few initiatives done by Government of India in terms of promoting local currency financing, especially which will be useful for infrastructure projects. Maybe I'll pause here, and maybe I'll come back later.
Thank you very much. Now we've just heard very important insights of the national DFIs of the three of the founding members of NDB. Last but not the least, let us also hear from Director General Jing, Treasury of Department of NDB, to share with you from Treasury's perspective our activities in fundraising, including our experience in the panda bond market, raising the currency of China.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. Although this is a panel discussion, informal, but I still prepared a slideshow to illustrate my points. So I will go through these page by page. It will be very brief. I will start from introducing NDB's funding strategy, and followed by an overview of China's bond market development. And lastly, I will introduce NDB's panda bond issuance experience. Regarding NDB's funding strategy, it aims to ensure that that sufficient resources are available to meet the NDB's funding and liquidity requirement while minimizing borrowing cost. The bank has been diversifying funding by market, by instrument, by currency, and in terms of tenor. As of July 2024, this year, NDB's total outstanding borrowing was around $16 billion, in which US dollar, CNY, and the ZAR, which is the South African currency, accounted for more than 96%. Of course, among these, US dollar alone accounts for more than 61%. the bank has been working on establishing bond programs in other member countries, such as India and Brazil as well. China's bond market has been important for NDB's local currency financing operation, mainly due to three factors. The first is the level of market development, and the second is the convertibility of the currency. The third is the availability of investable asset in this local market. Let's have a quick look at China's bond market. The vibrant market has become the second largest in the world in depth, efficiency, and accessibility, as well as resilience. According to the Bank for International Settlement, as of end 2023, the bond outstanding in China is around $22 trillion, lower than that of USA, but more than twice of that of Japan, and larger than the combined outstanding of Europe. In addition to its depth and scale, it is an increasingly open market. It was included into major global bond indices, such as the Bloomberg Global Aggregate Index, JP Morgan GBI EM Index, and the FTSE World Government Bond Index. For international investors, there are various mechanisms, such as qualified foreign institutional investors and the bond connection arrangement to facilitate their investment in the market. In this page, I would like to emphasize that the effort of member country to develop and open up its bond market can greatly help NDB's effort in its local currency financing operation. In the case of China, the market development was significantly bolstered by the convertibility of the currency and the convenience of managing the RMB liquidity. As some of you may be aware, renminbi has been officially recognized by International Monetary Fund to be a freely usable currency since 2015 and included officially in the special drawing right basket of IMF since 2016. There are two major criteria of IMF in doing this. First, the currency was widely used to make payments for international transactions. Second, the currency was widely traded in the principal exchange market. Since then, the holding of renminbi has been recognized as part of the foreign exchange reserve of central banks. In 2022, renminbi's weight in SDR further increased from 10.9% to 12.3% in the SDR basket. And part of IMF's review criteria and the conditionality is that China's central bank should ensure the convertibility of renminbi held by foreign central banks and the international financial institutions, including NDB. Next page shows that the bonds issued by offshore institutions or international issuers in this market, we call this market as called panda bond market. The first panda bond was issued in 2005, almost 20 years ago. At the end of 2023, more than 350 panda bonds were issued by 89 issuers from 20 countries and regions, with a total amount of $86 billion equivalent. In the chart, the orange ones represent sovereign issuers. The green ones are MDB issuers, and the blue ones are corporate or financial institutions. NDB has become the largest panda bond issuer with total issuance of $8 billion equivalent and total outstanding of $6 billion equivalent. And here, I would like to share the most recent panda bond issued by NDB. In late July, NDB issued a renminbi 8 billion 3-year panda bond, which is $1.1 billion equivalent. That bond issuance attracted significant interest from investors, with more than 30 onshore and foreign investors participating. The investors mainly included central banks, commercial banks, and sovereign institutions and investment funds from both domestic market and also from the foreign investors. The oversubscription of the bond reached 1.7 times, highlighting robust demand and high investor confidence. Some of the proceeds were converted into US dollar at a price that is significantly lower at that time than that of US dollar bond issuance. So at this swap, actually, our the converted US dollar equivalent price is 100 bips lower than otherwise the US dollar bond issuance by NDB. Yeah. So NDB will continue to improve its access to capital market and enhance the mix of currencies by exploring opportunities in local currency financing. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, DG Jin, for sharing the experience of NDB. We actually heard of interest earlier, both earlier and in the past few days again, interest from a few institutions from our member countries in raising funds in China panda bond market. And we also know that our peer MDBs, AIIB and AFDB, have already experience in supporting our common member country government in issuing panda bond in China. To that end, NDB also stands ready to give our support and assistance if needed to our member countries as well as institutions for their fundraising in China. As we are running behind schedule already, I feel really guilty to use more time to summarize or give any comments or raise questions of my own. But still, I would take the liberty to invite our panelists to give any further comments or questions among ourselves, if you have, as I promised at the beginning.
Maybe I can start.
Yes.
So the previous panel was more MDBs, and this panel is more national development banks or export credit agencies. So we need to discuss more in terms of how do we collaborate between the national development banks, international banks and MDBs for the common good of infrastructure. As EXIM, we look forward for working together with other multilateral agencies as well as national development banks. In fact, under BRICS ICM, we work closely with the BNDES, VBRF, CDB, and DBSA. So we also look forward to work with multilateral banks like NDB, AIB to co-finance projects in the region, ensuring in terms of confirming the mandates, because every institution has its own mandate, but there is an overlap where we can do co-financing. The other is in terms of learning the experiences and in terms of knowledge sharing. So these two just want to leave a thought in terms of how institutions can collaborate both in terms of financing and knowledge sharing.
Thank you.
I would like also to add, first on Mrs. Jin's presentation, we are actually analyzing the issuance of panda bonds. The Brazilian Treasury is analyzing that, and BNDES itself is already negotiating some local currency bonds, borrowing in Chinese currency from Chinese institutions. One of them is the NDB. since Brazil has a large trade relationship with China, that fits very well to our trade pattern, our balance of payments. And I agree also that our institutions can collaborate with information, with knowledge sharing, with co-financing. And we at BNDES are also trying to develop some special investment vehicles to help our companies to grow, not only in our countries, but also internationally. And this has been very successful in the past, and we are actually open for new cooperations with other developing banks.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Barbosa. Yes, please, Mr. Khan.
I'd just like to share arguably also some successes in that what has been lovely to see has been as a commercial bank to start seeing two local currencies where there is a cross-border element. The two local currencies are working with each other rather than going through to one of the hard currencies. So, for example, in South Africa, I've been involved in a couple of transactions where there's been a South African, a ZAR-based loan, but yet all the contracts and all the underlyings have been in RMB. And we have, as a commercial bank, we have facilitated that local currency, the two local currencies speaking to each other as opposed to pricing everything or working through US dollar. I think the other success is how, as a commercial bank, we have worked with many of the DFIs and multilaterals. And I think Lake Turkana was mentioned earlier. That was a great example where there were two commercial banks and I think 3 or 4 multilaterals and DFIs involved. So I think we've got to celebrate those successes also. And I think that there is going to be another one coming on this Libido corridor, which is from the DRC through Angola. I think there's a great opportunity there for, again, multilaterals, DFIs and commercial banks to work together. That's a regional play. And I think that'll be very powerful and a great success story.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Gunn. Success stories are surely what we all want to see. And coming from the private sector operations team of NDB, I'll assure you that we'll speak more to market and believing that national DFIs, MDBs, and commercial banks will surely end up in more collaboration than competition, with complementarity, both on the funding and on the investment sides. Can I ask if our colleagues...
Well, maybe can I touch a bit another point of view? There are much of what was said about that there are huge money, good liquidity on the markets. But dear friends, it's not only the fundraising, but the cost of fundraising is very important. In my case, it's very, very much important because key interest rates of the central bank now is as big as 18%. So fundraising and cost of fund depends a lot on the interactions with the credit rating agencies. And we still, where we were 10 years ago, I would like to say, even so, G20 recommended that we somehow agreed with the rating agencies on our special status. I am speaking about callable capital. There's no mutual understanding how it should be treated in terms of decreasing or increasing our credit ratings and decreasing our cost of funding. This big issue, and I believe we need to talk about this much more, to ask people who is involved in theoretical research of this issue and come to final suggestions. It's a really big issue. And if we manage to marry these credit ratings, expectations, callable capital, and supervision, I think we will have the chance to raise money on better terms and conditions, and so credit our clients on better terms as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me ask if DG Jing has anything to add.
Okay, I think the local currency financing is a very comprehensive work. It is actually a system engineering project. Requires many efforts from many aspects. From NDB and the Treasury, we are going to establish evaluation system to include indicators in various aspects to assess the environment of member countries in terms of its ability to conduct local currency financing. And in this process, we can also identify the weakness in the member countries to further improve so that the local currency financing in member countries can be achieved earlier.
Well, thank you very much once again, DG Jing. I'm fully aware of the time, but as this is a rare opportunity to pull together a group of distinguished and well-experienced bankers together, I would like to ask audience to bear with me for a few minutes. Let me open the floor to audience to see if you have any questions that you want to raise to the panelists on the stage, but also to the members of the earlier panel. And please raise your hands and the question, and make sure a question to address to the one that you want to you are looking to. Yes, please, on the right. Can I? Yeah, the mic.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Leon Liedemann. I'm Naum Chomsky, Joseph Stiglitz, Schumpeter, Karl Mannheim, Nikolai Kondrativ, all in one. If I raise 250 million, will the NDB give me 750 million to create a more equal society in South Africa? One of the biggest banks and insurance in this country said in 2018 that my model is a threat to the big banks and insurance companies. I've been given the right by the Reserve Bank. South Africa has become the most unequal society. What's so sad, one of the young men that enrolled me came to me and, what do you do? He's got a master's in economics. Imagine, must do admin work here. I was called in 2015 to set up semi-private schools and semi-private day hospitals to prevent the monopolies in South Africa. I've got insurance products. I believe in self-funding. Then go into food production and then into the semi-private schools. Those who know Professor Najabulu Ndebele, the chairman of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, told me 2 years ago, your model is the ideal model to break the inequality and the apartheid racial structure. Thank you, people. You have to speak up a bit because I've got hearing aids from rugby injuries.
Well, thank you for joining us today and share your views. As we have representatives here from both MDBs and national DFIs, all in a common understanding and joint efforts to support our member countries for development. I don't think we have any intention to exclude those who have a common commitment to the benefits of people and to the benefits of any market players that can contribute to this great undertaking. But can I invite any of our panelists just to give any comments or response? No. Or since there's not exactly a question, but a view, we take it and we'll bear it in mind going forward in structuring our operations, in deliver on our mandate and mission
to improve our work and our contribution to the development need of our member countries. Thank you very much.
Just a comment.
Yes,
on a related note, the infrastructure is defined in different way in different institutions and different geographies. That should be kept in mind, because what is infrastructure in Brazil may be slightly different what is in India. So that is one. And second, as I mentioned, every institution has its own mandate. So complying with its mandate and objectives and complying with this definition, I think there is something to be taken care.
Right. Thank you very much. As now we are really running behind the schedule, I want to close this panel discussion with a big thanks again to the panelists. Thank you very much for sharing your insights. Now, as we are coming to the close of the seminar today, let me invite Vice President and Chief Operating Officer, Mr. Kazbekov, to give the closing remarks. Okay, I don't see him. Okay, or perhaps he's having another engagement at this busy moment of the annual meeting. But as I said, I would feel guilty to keep you too long, but we've heard enough insights and views from different perspectives with regard to collaboration and partnership among DFIs, and views, reflections, and recommendations for action on expanding local currency financing, as well as ways to improve credit assessment. And I believe this seminar is not a one-time discussion, but the beginning of an ongoing exchange of views and shared experience among peers. And in our joint and constant exploration for the practice that best fits our needs. So let me conclude the seminar now by thanking every one of you for staying with us this afternoon. Thank you very much. And we wish, and I wish, to see you again in our next annual meeting, but also in all other occasions where we have more opportunities to work together. Thank you very much.